He always said that room was for business only, but I knew there was more behind it. When we first got married, I thought I knew everything about my husband. He was quiet but kind, dependable, a man of routine. He woke up early, brewed his coffee the same way every morning, left the house by 8, and came home just before sunset. We had what I thought was a simple, honest life. It wasn't until our 3rd year together that I noticed the pattern. Every Thursday evening, he'd say he had to check on some papers at the other place. That's what he called it. The other place. At first, I didn't think much of it. I trusted him. He'd come home late, smelling faintly of dust and old books, and sometimes of cigarette smoke, even though he never smoked. When I asked about it once, he said his business partner did. He had a way of saying things that made you feel silly for asking. Then one Saturday morning, I followed him. He didn't know. I told him I was going to visit my sister, but I waited 10 minutes after he left and took the car. He drove out toward the edge of town, past the main road and into a neighborhood I'd never been to. That's when I saw it. A small white house with green shutters tucked behind a row of tall hedges. He parked out front, unlocked the gate like he'd done it 100 times, and went inside. He stayed there for 3 hours. I sat 2 streets away, heart pounding the entire time, staring at that gate like it might swallow me. When he finally came out, he looked calm, too calm, like a man with nothing to hide. That night at dinner, I tried to bring it up gently. "Where were you today?" I asked. He didn't even look up from his plate. "You know where I was," he said. "Business." I pressed him, just a little. I said I'd driven by that part of town before and noticed a house that looked familiar. He froze. His fork stopped midair. Then he smiled. "You shouldn't go poking around, Anna," he said quietly. "There are things in life you're better off not knowing." That was the first time I felt afraid of him, not because of his words, but because of how calm he was saying them, like it wasn't a threat, just a statement of fact. After that, he changed the locks on the small office at home and stopped leaving the house key on the counter. He said he was just being careful. Too many burglaries in the area. But I knew what he was doing. He was building walls, brick by brick, around a part of his life I wasn't allowed to touch. I used to tell myself that all marriages have secrets, that maybe this was just his way of protecting me from something dull and complicated. Taxes, business deals, whatever. But deep down, I knew. No man hides something that carefully, unless it could destroy everything. Every time I asked, he'd twist the story, make me feel crazy for even wondering. After that night, the air between us changed. It wasn't obvious to anyone else. To our friends, we still looked like a quiet, respectable couple. But inside our house, there was tension in every silence. I stopped asking about the other place for a while, thinking maybe if I acted normal, he'd let his guard down. But he never did. He started spending more time at work. Some nights, he wouldn't come home until after midnight. I'd stay up waiting, the TV flickering in the background, rehearsing what I'd say when he walked through the door. But when he did, his tone, his calmness, it made my words vanish. One night, I couldn't hold it in anymore. It was late, around 11, when I heard his car pull into the driveway. I met him at the door before he could even take off his coat. "Where were you?" I asked. He sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Don't start, Anna." "Not tonight. I just want to know what's going on. You disappear for hours, you lie about where you've been." "I don't lie." He cut me off sharply, his voice suddenly hard. "You make things up in your head and then blame me for them." That was his trick. He'd make me sound unreasonable. And it worked, at least for a while. I started doubting myself, wondering if maybe I was being paranoid. But then came the call. A woman's voice. It was a weekday afternoon. He was in the shower, and his phone rang on the counter. I shouldn't have looked, I know that, but the name on the screen wasn't one I recognized. Just L, I answered. She paused for a second, then said softly, "Is he coming back tonight?" I froze. "Who is this?" The line went dead. When he came out of the shower, I was standing there with his phone in my hand. "Who's L?" I asked quietly. He didn't even flinch. "A client. She asked if you were coming back tonight." He took the phone from me, put it in his pocket and said, "You're losing it, Anna. You need to stop imagining things before you ruin this marriage." And just like that, he walked away. That night, I sat on the floor of our bedroom, shaking. Not crying, just shaking. It was like realizing you've been living with a stranger who's perfected the art of sounding sane while making you question your own. Over the next few months, he got colder. He'd come home, eat in silence, sometimes not even look at me. And when I tried to bring up the subject again, he'd laugh, and tell me I should talk to someone about my jealousy issues. I started writing things down, dates, times, excuses, because I felt like I was losing my mind. I thought if I could keep track, I'd see a pattern. And I did. Every Thursday, every single one. He'd leave by 6 p.m. and not return until nearly midnight. It wasn't business. It wasn't work. It was the other place, the one I wasn't allowed to see, the one that was eating our marriage from the inside out. After he died, the lawyer handed me an envelope with a single silver key inside. He died on a Wednesday morning, just like that. No warnings, no long illness. 1 minute he was mowing the lawn, the next he was on the ground. A heart attack, they said. Quick, painless. I remember standing in the kitchen, staring at his cup of coffee still half full on the counter, steam curling from the top like it didn't know he was gone. I didn't cry right away. I just froze. The funeral was small. He didn't have much family, and most of our friends were really just people from his work. Polite, detached. They said all the right things. He was a good man. He loved you so much. I smiled and nodded, but inside I was screaming, because I didn't know if any of that was true anymore. A week later, I got a call from his lawyer, Mr. Grayson. He asked me to come in to discuss the estate. I expected the usual things: the house, the car, maybe some bank paperwork. What I didn't expect was the small sealed envelope he slid across the desk toward me. "This was left for you," he said, in his handwriting. Inside was a single silver key and a folded note that simply said, "For when you're ready." I stared at it, confused. "Ready for what?" I asked. Mr. Grayson adjusted his glasses, looking slightly uncomfortable. "There's an address written on the back of the envelope. It seems he wanted you to have access to another property." My stomach turned. The address, it was that neighborhood, the one with the white house and green shutters. I tried to act composed, but my voice cracked when I asked, "How long has he owned it?" He flipped through some documents. "Nearly 15 years. Long before you two met, 15 years. That meant he'd kept it secret our entire marriage. Every single day of it. I drove home with the key heavy in my palm, like it was burning through my skin. For a week, I couldn't bring myself to go. Every time I tried, something in me stopped. A voice whispering, "What if you're not ready for what's behind that door?" At night, I'd sit up in bed, clutching that key, replaying every conversation, every lie. The phone calls, the excuses, the smell of smoke on his clothes. It all came back in flashes. Finally, one morning, I decided I couldn't keep living in the dark. He'd hidden too much, taken too much with him to the grave. I got in the car and drove out there, the same route I'd taken years ago when I first followed him. The hedges were taller now, the paint on the shutters fading. It looked abandoned. I parked in the same spot, key trembling in my hand, and walked up the path. The house was silent. When I reached the front door, I hesitated. I could almost hear his voice, calm, distant. "You're better off not knowing, Anna." But this time, he couldn't stop me. I slid the key into the lock and felt it turn with a quiet click. The door creaked open, and the smell hit me first. Not dust or emptiness, but something else. Something faintly sweet and human. My hands shook as I finally turned the lock and stepped inside his secret house. The air inside was heavy, stale, like no one had opened a window in years. I stood in the doorway for a moment, letting my eyes adjust to the dim light filtering through yellowed curtains. The place wasn't empty. That's what startled me first. I had imagined dust sheets, cobwebs, maybe a few boxes, but everything was arranged. There were dishes in the sink, a throw blanket folded neatly over the couch, and a faint trace of perfume I didn't recognize. I took a few cautious steps inside. The living room looked lived in, but quiet, frozen in time. A family photo hung on the wall, the frame crooked. My breath caught when I saw it, not because of him, but because of who was next to him. A woman, younger than me, dark hair, smiling, and a little girl. The child had his eyes. My knees almost gave out. I reached for the nearest chair and sat down hard, staring at that photo until the edges blurred. My chest felt tight, my hands cold. I wanted to scream, to throw the frame across the room, but all I could do was whisper, "You bastard!" On the coffee table were old magazines, a few children's drawings, and a mug with the word Dad on it, drawn in a child's handwriting. I got up slowly, heart pounding, and walked toward the hallway. There were 2 doors. One was a small bedroom with toys scattered across the floor. Dolls, picture books, tiny shoes lined neatly against the wall. The other door led to a room that made my stomach twist even harder. His study. It was identical to the one he had at home. Same desk, same lamp, even the same model of typewriter. I ran my hand over the surface, tracing the scratches, wondering how many nights he'd sat here pretending to be somewhere else. There were papers stacked neatly on one corner. I picked one up. It was a school enrollment form. The little girl's name was Lucy Hartman. His last name. That was the moment the lie became too real to deny. It wasn't just another woman. It was another family. I stumbled back into the living room, every breath like glass in my throat. The picture, the toys, the clothes, all of it was proof. He'd built an entire second life while sitting across from me at dinner, asking how my day was. I don't know how long I stood there before I noticed the smaller details, the open notebook on the table, the writing in his handwriting. Keep them separate. Keep her safe. Don't let Anna find out. Keep her safe. Not me. Not us. Her. I don't even remember leaving. I just know I ended up in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white, sobbing so hard I couldn't see the road. Every memory, every fight, every business trip. They all rearranged themselves into something that suddenly made sense, something that felt like a knife, twisting deeper the more I thought about it. He didn't just betray me. He built 2 worlds and chose to die before either one found the other. And now I was the only one standing in the wreckage of both. The walls, the photos, and the smell told me a story I was never meant to hear. I went back the next day. I don't even know why. Maybe I needed proof that it was real and not just some nightmare. The key still fit perfectly, and as I stepped inside again, I realized nothing had changed. It was still her house, their house, not mine. In the daylight, everything looked clearer, sharper. The furniture wasn't old or forgotten. It was cared for. Someone had dusted recently. There were fresh groceries in the fridge, milk, fruit, even a loaf of bread that hadn't expired yet. That's when it hit me. Someone had been here after he died. I checked every room, heart racing, whispering, "Hello," even though I didn't want an answer. The silence was unbearable, not peaceful, but expectant, like the house was holding its breath with me. In the bedroom, there were 2 closets. One side was clearly his. Same shirts, same aftershave, even the tie I'd given him for our anniversary 2 years ago. But the other side, her clothes, dresses, scarves, a soft pink sweater that smelled faintly like vanilla. There was a framed photo on the nightstand. Him again, smiling, younger, with the woman and Lucy. They looked happy. So happy it made me physically sick. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to understand how long this had been going on. 15 years. That meant she'd been there before me. Maybe even during his first marriage, if there was one I never knew about. But then, on the dresser, I saw a stack of letters. My name was written on the top one, in his handwriting. I didn't want to read it, but I did. Anna, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And you've done what I hoped you wouldn't. Gone to the house. I wanted to tell you everything, but I couldn't. You wouldn't have understood. Not the way things happened. I made mistakes. Big ones. But not all of it was a lie. Her name is Claire. The little girl is Lucy. They were part of my life long before you. I tried to take care of both of you the best I could. I never meant to hurt you, but I couldn't walk away from them either. I'm sorry. That's all it said. No explanations. No reasons. Just sorry. I tore the letter in half. Then again, until the pieces fell across the floor like snow. It wasn't enough. Nothing could ever make it enough. When I went back to the living room, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A photo album on the lower shelf of the bookcase. It was full. Page after page of birthdays, vacations, Christmas mornings, all with them. All the years he was working late. In the corner of one picture, I saw something that made my blood run cold. His wedding ring. The same one he'd worn every day of our marriage. He'd never taken it off. He hadn't been living 2 lives. He'd been blending them perfectly. And now, I had no idea which one of them, me or her, was the real lie. I learned who he really was, and who else he had been living with. 2 days after I found the letter, I got a call. A woman's voice, hesitant. "Is this Anna Hartman?" I froze. "Yes." "This is Claire." The air left my lungs. I couldn't speak. My mind flashed to the photo. Her face, the little girl, the house. She knew who I was. She must have known. "I think we need to talk," she said quietly. We met the next morning at a small cafe near the hospital. She looked exactly like her pictures, except older, tired, and hollowed out in the way grief leaves you. She was polite, careful, as if I might explode if she spoke too loud. "I'm sorry," she said, her hands trembling around her cup. "I didn't know about you. Not until after he died. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But the anger sat in my throat like a stone. How could you not know?" I asked. "You lived in his house." She shook her head. "He told me he was divorced, that you were his ex. He said you wanted nothing to do with him." I almost laughed, that bitter, humorless kind that feels like it comes from somewhere deep and broken. "That's funny. He told me you didn't exist." We sat there in silence, 2 women piecing together the life of a man who'd split himself in 2. She told me things I didn't want to hear. How he spent weekends with them. How he'd been there for every one of Lucy's birthdays. How he'd promised to marry her when the time was right. And somehow he'd managed to keep both worlds spinning, our holidays, our dinners, our anniversaries, without either of us noticing. I asked her when she'd last seen him. She said, The day before he died. He came by to fix the gutter and said he'd be back in a few days. He kissed Lucy goodnight. I didn't tell her that he'd died the next morning in our yard while I made coffee inside. When I told her about the key, about the letter, her eyes filled with tears. "He didn't even leave me that," she whispered. "I had to break a window just to get in after I found out." That was when it hit me. He hadn't just lied to me. He'd lied to both of us. He'd built two lives, not because he loved one more than the other, but because he couldn't stand to give either up. And when his heart stopped, he left two women behind, both grieving a man who'd never fully belonged to either of them. We sat there for hours, trading pieces of the puzzle, trying to see if they'd ever make a whole picture. They didn't. They never would. Before she left, she said something I'll never forget. He wasn't who we thought he was. But that doesn't mean the love wasn't real. I wanted to argue, to say that love built on lies isn't love at all. But I couldn't, because deep down, I knew what she meant. I'd loved him too, and that love, as poisoned as it was, had still been real to me. When she walked away, I sat there alone, staring at my reflection in the window. I didn't recognize the woman looking back. She wasn't a wife or a widow anymore. She was just a survivor of someone else's double life. I had to decide whether to destroy the lie he built or face it, and finally set myself free. After meeting Claire, I spent weeks in a fog, not eating, not sleeping, just existing. Everyone said grief makes people act strange, but this wasn't grief. It was something darker. Like my whole identity had been built around a story that never existed. I couldn't go back to our home. Every room felt like a crime scene. The kitchen where he'd smiled at me while planning his next visit to her, the bed where he'd held me after spending nights with them. I boxed up his things, one by one. Shirts, books, his watch. Each one felt like a small betrayal made solid. I didn't know what to do with the key to the other house. Part of me wanted to throw it in the river and pretend none of it ever happened. But another part, the angrier, colder part, wanted answers, wanted revenge. So I went back one last time. The house was quiet. Claire and Lucy had moved out. She'd left me a short note on the counter. "I'm sorry for all of it. I'm leaving town. I hope someday we can both start over." There was no bitterness in her words, and somehow that made it hurt more. I walked through the rooms slowly, touching the walls, the furniture, the remnants of a life that was never supposed to cross with mine. In the corner of his study, I noticed a small metal box I hadn't seen before. Inside were old photographs, not of me, not of her, but of him alone. Younger, freer. The version of him neither of us ever really knew. That's when I realized something. He didn't just live two lives, he lived none. He was never fully present in either, always running between them, pretending to be the man each of us needed him to be. And in the end, that's what killed him. The constant pretending, the weight of all those lies pressing down on one weak heart. I took one last look around, then locked the door behind me. I kept the key, not as a memory, but as a reminder. A small, heavy piece of metal that said, "Never ignore what your gut tells you again." Back home, I sat at the kitchen table, the morning light spilling across the wood. For the first time, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel broken. I just felt done. People think closure comes from answers, but it doesn't. It comes when you stop needing them. I still keep that silver key in my drawer. Sometimes I take it out and hold it, just to remember that even the people who claim to love you most can have whole worlds they never show you. But I also remember something else. That surviving the truth is its own kind of freedom. He may have built a life of secrets, but I'm the one who walked out of it still standing. And I never looked back.